Moving on to reports. Report 6.1, page 6. We have a road safety update. I'm going to welcome Daniel Norday up to speak to the report. This purpose is to provide us some information on road crashes, trends, road safety strategy. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to give my report. So the purpose of the report is just to indicate where we are at the moment with our road crashes and road safety in the district. As you can see by the graph on page, I think it's 6, we have a huge reduction over the last 30 years in crashes. And we're talking about fatal and serious injury crashes here only. So we're not taking the minor injury crashes into account. You may ask what happened in 2016, between 2016 and 2020. As you know, we've had less travel in 2020, 2021, so that's one of the reasons why there's less crashes, and these are just local roads only. And based on for that dot on 2030, that is based on the government's target to reduce our road deaths by that number by 2030. Unfortunately, 2018 was a very bad year for us, so that just pushed that level up higher. I would actually like to see that become less. A few common things that we need to realise there, that is in a typical rural setup like we have, we don't have black spots to say where we see regular crashes at particular spots. We know of one or two, but they're far out random, and that's our challenge, is we can't specifically pinpoint where the next crash is going to be. So that makes it a wee bit challenging to get that message across. So in reality, it means that the risk is significant or higher across the region. And especially on our rural roads, open speed limits, we obviously see more severe crashes. Police resources are inconsistent, and as you may have noticed in the previous paragraph, one of the previous paragraphs, they are one of our key partners. And in terms of research, we know that locally delivered programs in conjunction with enforcement has the biggest effect on driver behaviour. But we are working on that. As you know, we have now a new manager for our district, police manager, and I'm looking forward to catching up with her to work towards a more efficient way to do this. I just thought I'd highlight the thing is that the risk doesn't always reflect what people believe, and these I'm not going to go into details unless you have any questions about that. It's interesting, if you've looked at the research that we've attached, that there are about 4 or 5 common concerns from the public. And here specifically in South Canterbury, we're talking about people thinking weather conditions is a major concern, high traffic volumes and heavy vehicles. Now, in regards to weather conditions being part of the crashes, it might help for people to believe that, because our serious injury crashes during bad weather events are significantly lower than the normal day-to-day. So most of our crashes happen on some sunny days like this, no weather at all, and that's when people start to drop their concentration because they feel safer, and that's when these things step in. On the right-hand side of that table, we've got some behavioural risk that people have identified, and no surprises there. This basically, if you looked at that report, the majority of the Canterbury-wide community agrees with this. So it's 45% aggressive or impatient drivers I see as behavioural risk, 44% cell phone use, and 34% driving too fast. Interesting in that last bit there is when you interview people and you ask what the speed should be around the houses, the homes. A lot of people would say, yes, the people are driving too fast, but they don't want to slow themselves down to those places. And all you need to just look is where you want to turn into your driveway, and you see people impatiently trying to park in your boot. Crash dynamics. I thought that'd be very helpful to give you the table which we show, and then again, this is for their serious injury crashes only, and this is also based on our local roads only, is to basically divide this up into the age groups that we sort of target, and then on the left-hand side there, on the rows there, we have the type of crashes, and you can see that if you looked at the, obviously no surprises, the age group 15 to 19 are one of the highest ones in that particular one, although they are succeeded by the 35 to 39-year-old group in our group. So it just shows you that although the younger ones, if you combine that, remember just that this is a 5-year age grouping where we normally go to the 10 years, but if you combine that to the drivers under 30 are obviously one of our biggest concern, and until they get that skill and experience that comes later in life, they are at risk, and we see that from our statistics. So we are running programs for that. So if you look at this table there, we can't particularly say that, hey, we need to focus just on the young ones, because it seems to be distributed amongst the age group across the region. So I think it's important maybe just to mention that we basically have three types of, in terms of what we do when we deal with road safety or driver behaviour. We basically got three groups where you've got the top high-end, high-risk takers, which obviously far in the minority. Then you've got the middle group who just go about their normal day-to-day business, and they're not particularly concerned about the risk, as so to speak. A lot of that is ignorance. If you think about seat belts, safety belts we had in the past, when most of us were much younger, we didn't have the wearing rate for seat belts as we are having now. So the question was, what did we not know then, what we know now? And over time, it was just purely ignorance. If we, it wasn't a big issue until people realised there's better ways of doing it. And then the last group are the ones that's already extremely careful, and they're usually the ones we see at our events that we hold. They'll approach us, and because they've got an interest in safety, but they're not necessarily our target audience. Our target audience would be, for us, the middle group, the larger middle group, because there could be a lot of ignorance with that, and if we could just sway them over to the safer group, I think we'll have a lot of benefit. The top group, where we got the high-risk takers, it's highly unlikely that we will, by road safety promotion, change the behaviour. I always say we leave that up to the pulley system to deal with those. Unfortunately, they do have a huge impact, as we know. Last year's bad crash out at Washdyke, we had several fatalities there in one crash, but that's things we are working on. And I think the last thing I just want to highlight here is maybe just a summary also of what I mentioned with the three crash road user type. Was the research that was done that actually highlighted a lot of things that we didn't know, and that was the research that was done first in Scandinavia, and then later we duplicated that in New Zealand in 2018, I believe. And that was, why are so many people being killed or injured on our road? Do we go out there and say, okay, I'm just going to drive like I feel, or are people in general more likely to do the right thing, and which the latter is the truth? It's just unfortunately that with the whole setup with the roads and the conditions and all that, things can easily get out of hand. You know, a minor error could result in serious consequences. And I think that's our study or our focus that we need to do, is bring people along the way to understand the risk and to take the necessary actions. And that's what we're trying to do with our education. We do a lot of advertising. We're trying to reach people at all levels. As you know, it's hard to reach the young ones, because by the time we've caught up with their system, it's already outdated, and we've got to catch up again. So we rely a lot on influences. So that's why you see we use media where the parent may influence the behavior of the child, or in school setup and so on. And we're using that sort of tool to see if we can change people's attitude towards their driver behavior. And then the last thing I think I just want to highlight here is that we finally come together as a region wider than we used to operate in the mid-South Canterbury. And we've got Northern Waitaki also on board. So we're trying to promote the same message, same time. We're following the police's RITS theme, which is restraints, impairment, distraction and speed. And we're hoping that we follow that model there, that we will benefit from the impact. Because if we can promote the message at that time, police go out, they enforce it, everybody talks about it, I think then we could potentially change outcomes for ourselves, in where people realize there are risks that you can't really eliminate by engineering at all. So as part of that project that we're doing, I think it's also important that we've identified that decision-making is a major component for driving. And that's why we decided to support the driver simulator model. Not everybody agrees that it's the best, but our thoughts was just when we got approached by Fulton Hogan to donate that trailer that they use for their workplace training. We jumped on board to get that, and it was a really good partnership, I think, with Fulton Hogan, ourselves, our colleagues, and also Venture Timaru, and the company who was constantly developing the software. And we actually went beyond with this thing where we're using the latest technology available, which become cheaper. It's not just the screens that we see now, it's things that you can actually monitor the driver while they're doing that, the session on the simulator. We can monitor their eye movement in there, so we know where they're looking at, their heartbeat, the heart rate, So when you put them in situations, you know, and it's to instill that muscle memory, can I say, into young drivers when they come up, or any driver for that matter, you come up to a situation and you have a plan in place. That would be the best, I think, defense mechanism. And so we're hoping that if we, by going through that, we'll eventually get to the level where we've got people with good decision-making skills when it comes to driving and so on, and hopefully that will also result in lower crash or deaths and serious injuries.
Thanks, Daniel.
Any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Pye.
I just wondered, how does your work fit into the government's Road to Zero campaign, if you don't mind?
Yes, so we clearly follow the government's Road to Zero model, and we're trying, but like any district is different, so it's sometimes challenging to follow that same national thing. So but in general, we have the same issues, so we definitely follow that.
The funding for road safety is very much driven by the Road to Zero campaign, so yeah, government sort of vets, I guess, our programs and make sure that they are aligned.
Just on that comment, Daniel, I just found it interesting with the Road to Zero, and it's probably more a comment than a question. So their vision is for zero deaths and serious injuries, but then if you look at point 15, even if the road crews obeyed all the rules, we'd only half the fatality rate to 49. So it's like they've got this vision or their statement, but is it really a smart statement? Because is that achievable realistically?
Yep. I thank Councillor for that. It's a good question, and we hear that a lot. A lot of people believe that it's an unachievable goal. But I think from the government's perspective, and some of the advertising you may have seen on television, to try and break that cycle, where we accept that the road toll is just part of our transportation system. I realise it's a very hard goal to reach. Just coming back to your reference to point 15, that's actually very important for us to realise, is that it's not just by following the road rules, because in many cases the road rules are the minimum standards, the minimum requirements. It's that bit in between that's actually the highest issue, where people just go about their business on a day-to-day business thing, and something happens. It could be a minor thing that starts trickling this whole thing, and they end up, and then that's when your speed, your environment and things all plays a role when it comes to the outcome of that crash.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. Any questions? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Daniel, just on cell phone use, you mentioned you're going to be talking with the new area commander at some stage soon. It's obviously identified as being one of the major behavioural risks that we have on our roads. And we all know from just driving around how many people are on their cell phones at any one time while they're driving. So what sort of conversations are you going to have with the new area commander about enforcement of making sure that people are getting off their cell phones while they're driving?
Thank you, Councillor. A very good question, and it's probably a challenging one for us too, because we do have perceptions out there and habits where people don't think it will happen to them. That's our biggest obstacle, I think, in accepting the risk. And it's not necessarily just holding the cell phone in your hand. It's engaging that conversation, which is actually your highest risk. So at the time when you may recall when you drive and you're speaking on the phone, could be hands-free and so on, for a time you drive on autopilot. Unless you are well trained, you've trained your subconscious very well, it's going to do something stupid that you're not aware of. And so I know they've got some ideas, but it's very hard to prove beyond reasonable doubt in a court that the person actually did use their phone. So I think they've got technology that they've tried in Auckland, they've tried that in Australia, cameras and so on. But at the end of the day, it's going to be challenging to prove those cases, and it's very labour intensive. So we're hoping that we could educate people more, and then by speaking out against that sort of behaviour, we'll change that behaviour. But it happens, across the board. It's not just one age group that does it. I've seen people my age, holding cell phone like that in the car, or even think this is good. This is my hands-free. I drive. So that is a challenge, Councillor. Not sure we'll solve it easily.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Councillor Burt.
Yeah, a very good question you had before. You stole my thunder, but because it's totally flies in the face, as you said, with zero, deaths and serious injuries by 2050. But the second question to that, where it says system failure, so it talks about system failure. What does that actually mean in terms of scope of that, and does that include the state of our roads?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That's a very good question. I think I should have actually explained that. So when it comes to system failure, it means that it could be somebody who drives an older car, may not have a seatbelt in the back, some of those things not required by law. So it's not illegal to drive those vehicles if they are exempted, but just purely because they don't have that safety feature on them will definitely have an outcome on the road. Same with, a good example is tyre tread. The minimum by law is 1.5. This is way below this real safer option, although we don't see in our crash statistics that skidding cars or anything is contributing very high to serious crashes. System failure could also be there's a ditch on the side of the road, there's a tree, it's not illegal to have a tree or anything there, and it just happens that the driver ends up at that particular point where this conflict happened, and the aftermath of that, they end up in a ditch or hit a tree or a post or a pole. And that's basically what the system failure is, so to speak. It's not illegal, but it has a huge impact on the outcomes of crashes.
Thank you. Thank you for your report, Daniel. I enjoyed reading the Road Safety in Canterbury report. Women continue to be better drivers than males, so that is good. Just wanted to point that out. But here's my question. It wasn't, actually. It was about 80-70. Anyway, we won't go into
Different
that.
report.
I wanted just to talk about and acknowledge the initiatives around the driving simulators. I think it's fantastic, and I would like to also challenge you. It's not just local high schools, but there are other agencies within South Canterbury that have this initiative running, for example,
Yes.
YMCA.
That's right.
So it'd be really good if we could have a holistic approach going forward, because we some of those are the most vulnerable youth in our communities, and so it'd be really good to expand this initiative for our young people.
Thanks, Councillor. That's definitely part of our campaign to include everybody that's potentially high-risk road users. And so we'll be monitoring that and report back on the progress, because that's one of the great systems, features of the system. We can actually report back on progress.
Thank you, Councillor Scott, and I'll come to you in just a moment. I was just following on from Councillor Scott about the initiative. I think it's fabulous. Also, the good work that you've done collaboratively with the safety of scooter riders as well recently, and also with our ageing population, and in my job in health, we often get asked about driver's licence for ageing adults with cognitive impairment and dementias, and it's not necessarily a doctor's or a nurse's role to figure that out on the day, but those simulators will definitely, hopefully, be able to play a role if we can have them, for wider use for the community.
Thanks, Councillor.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Daniel, for your report. Just a quick question. Last night we saw on TV that they're reducing some speed limits around the country. Some communities, especially around Geraldine, have requested speed limit changes to make it safer. Does this now mean that it's going to be more simpler for councils to be able to reduce those speed limits for their community, or is it still a very long process like it has been in the past?
Thank you, councillor, for the question. I would actually ask Mr. Dixon to respond
Yes,
to that.
through the chair, the speed limit conversation will have to come to council probably early next year. We're looking at doing that. It is still, we do not have to have a bylaw anymore when it comes to speed limits. It'll be a national register. However, it is up to the local districts to prepare a speed limit management plan, really. So we make recommendations that is then signed off on a regional basis, and then it is incorporated in the national register. So it is still a long and involved process. It still takes a lot of time, and it's still challenging. Yeah.
Are we going to challenge central government on that to make it simpler?
We have been for years. Is the short answer, but yeah, that is. I don't know why speed limits have so much consultation and so much involvement. Really, they're just a tool in the toolbox. They're no different to putting a stop sign up on an intersection. Yeah, it's still a traffic control or making a street one way, but we don't have to go through the same process with those. Yeah.
Mayor Bowen.
Yes, sir. That goes to a point I'd like to make is, and it's been 2 years we've been, talking about those, speed limits, or it feels like, doesn't it? So, and meanwhile we've still got, at-risk areas across the district, and I just feel the model is wrong, and I wonder with even the Road to Zero if that's efficient use of funding, where, like any government money, it comes with a government KPIs, and it's about those local solutions that will fit for us, and we can often get on and get a lot more done if we don't have those restrictions. It's probably more of a comment. Apologies.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Councillor Booth.
Just a couple of things in your report, page 5, I suppose it is, with the crash, your numbers from 1980 down to 2022. There was an increase of almost 50%, 2018 to 2019. Seems quite a bit. And was there any explanation, was it for that? And I guess was that the national trend? And secondly, is there any consideration given in here the fact that traffic registered vehicle numbers have increased by a third in the last 10 years? Is that sort of incorporated into this report to reflect the fact there's actually a lot more cars on the road?
Councillor, good comment. Personally, I think that evaluating the death and serious injury rate by kilometres travelled would probably be a better measurement. So that means that we know the exposure of drivers, and we measure that according to the actual kilometres travelled. What you may have noticed here in 2016, 2018, that it's just typical of the crash trends, is that you may have a good year and then you have several bad years, and it's just highlighting it. So that's why we don't really look at short-term outcomes. It's got to be over the long term. So I think that we're yet to find out what that is. I have my suspicions of what probably happened there. I can't really honestly say that, until I've checked that out. But the good thing about that is that the trend in general is going down, and as I think as technology and thing also improves, and also on the medical side, better responses and things like that, people have a better chance now to survive. those questions.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, we'll look at the recommendation that the Infrastructure Committee receives and note the road safety report. Do I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, councillor Burr, and a seconder. Mayor Moen, Mayor Bowen. All those in favour? Against, carried. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to report 6.2 on page 88. And I am welcoming Grant Hall up to the table. So this is regarding the residual disaffection for Geraldine water supply.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the chlorination of the Geraldine water supply. So I won't, there's a couple of points within the report that I thought I might highlight, if that's okay. I won't go into the detail in terms of the legislation, but basically we have a duty of care. This has come through from the Water Services Act of 2021. That includes providing a water safety plan, which incorporates a multi-barrier approach, and if you have reticulation, then you need to have a residual disinfection within that reticulation. So although, back in the 2018 long-term plan, Council resolved that Council does not carry out routine chlorination of the Geraldine water supply until such time as it becomes mandatory. That time is pretty well here. We do, there is and I touch on exemptions, not to chlorinate, and we can only really go on the information that we have, and the drinking water regulator has provided us, or provided everyone, with some information under their strategy, which is that exemptions would be used sparingly and in exceptional circumstances. To note that to date, there still haven't been any exemptions for residual disinfection granted by Taumata Arawai. There have been some applications that have been made, and so it'll be with interest that we will watch to see how they proceed. By not applying for an exemption at the moment doesn't mean that we can't apply for one in the future, but certainly at this point we need to chlorinate the Geraldine water supply. Information that Taumata Arawai have also provided, which I've provided in the report, includes the attributes for consideration in terms of applying for an exemption, and as noted, they're really quite extensive. There's a significant amount of work that would need to be done, and basically that work needs to have been completed before an exemption would be granted. On that basis, I mean, I won't talk about the offences under the Act, but that does relate to up to $3 million for basically the supplier at $1.5 million in terms of being reckless. So we did have 2 drop-in sessions out at Geraldine. Councillor Oliver was present, which were, I think, quite successful in that it provided an opportunity for the consumers in Geraldine to come and talk about the situation. We did only get, not counting the community board members, 18 people with a double up, so sort of 17 people over the 2 sessions in total. But I think it was quite successful in terms of our being able to discuss in detail with those concerned consumers the issues. Haven't had any further feedback from any of the community from having sent out the information, which went to all parties, and basically we are looking to commence the chlorination in Geraldine in the very near future, i.e. hopefully this week. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Grant. Councillor Oliver.
When you say this week, is it today, the 15th of November is today, is it today, Grant? Or are we notifying our residents that it is, what day it is going to be put in?
So we had to have our water safety plan in by today. That water safety plan indicates that we would be chlorinating before the end of the year. However, the gear is going into place. Well, it went in on some gear went in on the weekend, and we are hoping to commission the plant, all things going well this week. So that would mean that basically it would be operational from next week.
Okay. Are we notifying the
And
public?
we'll notify the public
The community that?
through in the community through our our normal media means. We won't be sending out a letter to everyone as we did with the first one, but it'll be in the local newspaper and on social medias.
Okay. Just like to say that although it is unpopular and it was always going to be from the start, I can see there's no one in the crowd today, so that's good. But I do commend Grant and his team for coming out and doing that work. The public relations obviously tempered down what was actually happening, what's actually going to happen in a couple of days. So that was good, and I think the Geraldine people have realised that this isn't in the hands of the council, it's actually in the hands of central government and the Water Standard Authority. So it's been a good exercise obviously for having to do something this in the future.
Fluoridation.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Any other questions from the floor? Councillor Booth?
Grant, yeah, look, considering last week we had a meeting where we accepted the Three Waters funding, first tranche. So really that means that we're actually going down that track. And obviously you mentioned we're spending, is it $1.5 million? Is that how much it's going to cost to do this job or not? How much is it going to cost?
For Geraldine chlorination? No, nothing like that. Crikey, I'd say it's probably about $100,000.
Okay,
Maybe less.
Fairly insignificant. So that isn't added to the debt for the waters, so we can get money back from when they take away debt off our hands.
That's right.
We can do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Mayor Bowen?
Sorry, when you say, Councillor Booth, better off funding, that we're going down that track. So clarify that for me. What track we're going down?
Accepting the first tranche of funding, we're going down the line of acceptance. Well, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that's opinion only. I've got a question though, through Madam Chair for Councillor Oliver. Did you get much as far as community feedback on this one? Obviously, going back to long-term plan when it was an issue around Pleasant Point, most people were quite supportive. Geraldine weren't at the time. I think 93% were against, but it felt like it was a small part of the community, trying to push back against chlorination at the time. So, have you had that pushback like you expected?
No, I don't think we have. I think that with the information going out from council around the chlorination being put in the water, I think that there's definitely the majority of the people we had through were more worried about what chlorination will do, skin rashes, and some people have those sorts of things. There is a bit of a splinter group, I'd say, out there that was deadly against it. We had a couple of them come in. I think Beth could say that, they came in firing, but, after a really good conversation, sitting down with them for an hour and stuff, they realised that this, we stuck, I think for TDCs, we stuck to our guns. We said we wouldn't chlorinate till it was mandatory, and we always knew it was going to become mandatory, so now that it has, I think everyone's, the phone might ring if they can smell chlorine in their shower in the next couple of days, or taste it, I'd imagine, but I think Grant's got a pretty good system in place with getting rid of that, so I'm confident that hopefully in a couple of months it might be all sort of blown over. But yeah, it was a good exercise.
There will certainly be, for everyone that has chlorinated, although actually I know I tell a lie, when we did that in Pleasant Point, we didn't get any feedback at all, but you quite often do get a peak right at the very start while the chlorine interacts with that the biological film on the inside of the pipe, and you do get a period of in Christchurch as an example, the way that their system works is very different to how Geraldine works, where they've got all their bores and all the chlorination was all very close to the housing. We're very different to that, and so we are really hoping that we don't get too many complaints, but there will bound to be some for sure.
Thank you, Grant. Any other comments?
Thank you for saying comments. I honestly...
Councillor Burt, do you want to say something?
I do, indeed. Bearing in mind that sound bites can lead the day here at any time, I want to revisit that comment made by Councillor Booth, and we need to know and understand that when we accepted that Better Off funding, that there was no intention at all of us going down any track, either being led down there or having an implicit or an understanding that we had capitulated in any way. We do not in any way agree with Three Waters. Our philosophy was we need to take that funding. It's not tied just to water, and it won't be used obviously for the chlorination, which is a very important factor, and we'd be silly not to take it. So let's be very clear about that. We're not going down any track that's likely that we're capitulating. We're holding firm. Sorry, thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Burt. If there's any more questions regarding the report, I'll take them. If not, do I have a mover for the report? Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Seconder? Councillor Jackson. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to report 6.3, page 95. So I welcome Tracy Bell up. So this report is seeking additional funding request for the Sea Play Playground to upgrade health and safety components of it to council standard, I believe. And Councillor Jackson, you're going to sit back for this one. Thank you. Okay, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as you would have read in the report, the Sea Play Committee are seeking an additional funding of $300,000 because council will take over the Sea Play program once it's completed. We needed to have some maintenance resilience put in there, so we've asked the Sea Play Committee to bring it up to a particular standard. For example, we've asked for concrete paths because this decreases the slip factor, and it's also not quite as hot on children's feet in the summer. We've also asked for a pour-and-play surfacing on the playground mounds because this it's superior to the alternative of turf, and it also lowers the maintenance costs that council will face over the whole life of the project. So that's basically the reason that we're here.
Thanks. Thank you, trustee.
Yes, yeah, so basically, I think the other factor that's important to note is costs are continuing to go up. So there's a battle right across the board. And the CPLAY committee are going back to looking for additional funding from Mid-South Canterbury Trust. I think they put an application for another 250,000. But yeah, and they're just seeking, I guess, this extra 300,000, which is, as Tracy said, is predominantly due to the fact that we're asking for a higher standard, which will pay dividends in the long term. It will reduce our whole life costs. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Scott?
I have several questions. So first of all, I want to ask, if it's to improve safety, why didn't the council highlight this earlier to the committee or the developers, since we've been involved in this project for a year now?
Through the chair, the request for these standards has always been there. It's just, I guess, the situation is that the CPLAY committee, in order to meet the current budget, could reduce costs by going to AC, by using topsoil, turf, etc. So, and that's an option that they could take. It's one we, as a council, would rather not take, and therefore we are prepared to make the contribution, or recommending I make the contribution.
I just have one more question too. So my understanding and reading is that the CPLAY fundraised 2.5 million, which was originally they were to raise 2.2 million. So they had an additional 300,000 in their back pocket. And now they are seeking a further 300,000, which I understand is being driven by the council. But is the total increase in cost actually 600,000? So they're putting up their 300,000 that was raised over and above the original budget, and then we're also giving them a further 300,000. So is it actually 600,000 increased cost for this project?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, that's the case. So, I think that when the costings were done initially, there were still some unknowns, in particular around pricing, and the earthworks is quite a significant factor. That there was an assumption that I think a lot would be donated in kind rather than actually having to pay for. We have now got confirmation that it's not quite the case.
Yeah, good questions. To give some context for that, the first 300,000 you've got to look at as cost overruns and increases that everyone's facing, and we hear every day what's happening in that environment, and that's come to us before. And then I suppose the second tranche we're talking about is expectations from the council, and we need to give context for that. And there was an explanation there that if we do it this way, it's going to, going forward, when we take it over, there will be savings, ongoing savings around maintenance and things like that. So that last bit is driven by us, but there are gains for it. I think the original concept for it all and what's happening, and the fact that we are taking it over, we need to push forward on it. And with that, I'm quite happy to move the motion that we do, in fact, agree to the extra funding.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Councillor Parrington.
Just a question around, we're up for 300, they've gone to Mid-South Canterbury for another 250. If Mid-South Canterbury say no, are we up for the other 250 as well?
Assuming that they are successful with the extra funding from Mid-South Canterbury Trust, the actual shortfall is $300,000, yeah, which we're funding, yeah, or proposing.
So they're actually 550 short, is that what we're saying? I just want to make this clear, because I don't want to agree to 300, the trust turns them down and it's another 250. We just need to be really clear, like Councillor Scott said, around these numbers, and it's not in this report.
Yes, that is correct. They are 550,000, yeah, short of funding.
Thank you, Councillor Parrington. Any other questions Councillor Birch.
I mean, if there's an appetite here to have a caveat on that recommendation or that motion around that it's contingent on them receiving the 250 and then we revisit, I'm more than happy to do that.
But Andrew, you also said that they are looking to do other fundraising. So they've obviously got an application into Mid-South Canterbury Trust. Well, is there any other additional work going that could lower our grant or donation or whatever it is?
Yeah, through the chair, they are not seeking additional fundraising, but we are negotiating with some contractors to try and get some extra, I guess, assistance through kind rather than cash.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Booth.
Yeah, look, I'd probably just like to second motion on sort of whatever happens is probably going to have to happen. So, as it stands, yeah, thanks.
Okay, so as the recommendation stands, you're happy to second it. Are you happy to continue to be the mover without any covenant on it? Councillor Burt?
In the event of no other appetite for that, I think, you know, these are very, very good things that we need to consider. But given the fact that council are driving some of the cost savings in kind that are likely to, I'd say very much likely to happen, we need to be mindful that that should reduce that end of this debt. But so without a caveat, I'm quite happy to move it.
Okay, so I have a recommendation as it stands on your report, moved by Councillor Bird and seconded by Councillor Booth. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Moving.
Can I just make a comment through you, Madam Chair? I just think there's the questions that have come up are quite important in the fact that the report's missing some financial information. I think that's really important moving forward because those questions are going to be asked sort of every time. So if that can just be something that's taken on board, I guess. Thank you.
Noted, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our final report, which is 6.4, page 97. It's a Highfield Recreation Area Update. I welcome Bill Steens. So welcome, Bill. I'll let you speak to the report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is just a high-level update on where we've got to. At this stage, we're still waiting on the golf facilities review and the modelling and design of the stormwater retention component. So in the interim, we've been working around that and any potential decision that there might be around subdivision. So we've had some preliminary designs. Unfortunately, they're not at a stage where we can share them yet. They're still dependent on those other things. But if you look at the reason that we have this opportunity is that the Highfield Golf Club have earlier on downsized the area that they wished. The community came to us and a number of opportunities or other options were considered, and we did some 3 stages of consultation. There was early feedback from the community. We had drop-in in an evening at the Town and Country Club, and we also put out a survey, which is page 2 of the report, and there were 3 options considered. The park only, of which 31% of the respondents favoured, a park and subdivision, which 17% responded, golf and park was 52%. At the time, they weren't asked golf, park and subdivision, so that's another option that could be considered in the future. So the golf facilities review, there is a draft report finalised, which is now being discussed with clubs, I understand, and there is a meeting due over the next few days or week or two. So after that, it will be presented to us, and hopefully we'll be able to make some real progress going on from there. So.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions from the floor? Councillor Shannon.
Just a quick one, Bill, actually, just with regards to some of those plans, some of the visuals, would they be ready at the same time? Because I think that would make a big difference to what we're looking at.
Yes, I think we'll have something that that'll enable the plans to be finalised a bit around what the scope is and things like that. We're guessing at the moment.
Thank you. And Councillor Booth.
Yeah, look, this has probably taken 3 years, or it's probably been in the system for a bit longer than that. Bill, how realistically can we put a time on this and push on?
The sooner the better from my point of view. I'm advised indirectly that there's a meeting of RNE Golf which might be happening within the next week. Once we get that information, we're in a position to come back to council and make some decisions around subdivision, around golf, and then we can get on with it, really. So that's what we're waiting on.
So, Bill, do we not have to wait also for the modelling of the flooding area to be completed to be able to pull everything together? Because there's no point looking at a plan and then thinking, oh, actually we need to put a dam there, so that's not going to work.
Yes, what we need, you're quite correct, Madam Chair, that we need the footprint of the dam, so we know how the golf course, any potential golf course, and any walkways or any planting or other uses can fit around that. I'm not aware of one at the moment, unfortunately. It's not part of this project. It's another thing that we're working on.
It's a concern that we're going to go down one track and look at park, golf, recreation, and then we're going to get this other report back about what we need to do for stormwater, and it's not going to match.
No. We've got an approximate position, which where the map is, it's in the stream about where the words Waimataetai of Waimataetai stream are shown. So it's in that some area, but we don't know the volume that it's got to hold or the actual configuration, I suppose, and we're just waiting on that. So I know there's work underway, but I don't know of when the time frame is. So happy to bring everything together so we can make an informed decision.
Thank you.
Yeah. In regard to the stormwater work, yeah, we have engaged a consultant to look into that, and they are working on it. Unfortunately, resourcing is a challenge at the moment, particularly around the stormwater space. So we have a team of 3 and 3 vacancies in house at the moment. So it's difficult, but we'll try and progress that as fast as possible.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Councillor Booth?
Have we got any commitments in our long-term budget? What dates have we, or what years have we put money into that budget for this?
So currently it was a 10-year time frame in the current long-term plan. We have been slower out of the blocks than we intended to be because of these delays. We're waiting on other information. So that will have to be reviewed at the next long-term plan.
Thank you. I guess, yeah, it's a mil per year over 10 years or something like that, wasn't it? And it was always going to be a longer term redevelopment. And obviously Golf is still trying to work through what they're going to do, because from time to time, anecdotally, you get the question around, hey, council, what are you doing? But actually have Gulf presented a business case around their investment into this space, because from my expectations from the long-term plan and signing off that money, it was never for us to invest in a golf course, it was for us to invest in the recreation area overall. And so, yeah, have we got that business case from Golf yet as to what they're doing? Because just bearing in mind, this came and started, the conversation started from when Golf came to us and said they couldn't afford to stay in the current model. Obviously, I assume that the model's slightly better with them operating under the TNC club, but that ongoing model for us to commit, there's a lot of information we need before we can actually move forward and make these decisions.
Yes, there is, and until we get the final outcome, that will have an impact on that model. But I think we've been clear in the past that, from council's point of view, that it would be a lease, and any club would operate the golf course the same as others.
Yeah, and that's why probably key to this is that underlying golf study and how those golf clubs work together. As we all know, many codes are under stress, and that's the model moving forward, isn't it? So I look forward to hearing what comes from that.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Any other questions or comments?
Councillor
Skelch.
Bill, was there any other infrastructure issues within the area?
So at the same time as the modelling for the stormwater retention dam, there is, within that process, there is a water supply and a sewer drain that goes across the area. The proposal early on was to raise some of the manholes on the sewer to overcome spillage issues and provide a mound or a bund over that particular pipeline, which hopefully will not interfere with golf or other uses significantly. So that is part of the process as well. And I think I mentioned in the report, we've had geotechnical investigations into the entrance from Wallbow Street to a quarry. We haven't got the outcome yet, but there needs to be some work done there because of underrunners in that particular area. So that's part of the process as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Happy to move. So I've got a mover for the recommendation that we receive and note the report. Got a seconder? Councillor Burt. Thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, so that brings us to the end, and Infrastructure Committee close at 11 minutes past 12.